for this year, the last EC Northern Region meeting, or basically the Northern Region Council for this year, 2024. I think this meeting has been organized and recently we just concluded. Yes, Raja, don't look that surprised, your ears going to But I would like to welcome all the distinguished chairs of the Northern Region and also all the committee members, the state chairs, as well as vice chairs. Thank you very much for your continued support and guidance. Obviously, we all know there has been a recent conclusion of the World Economic Forum at Davos, which India was very well represented. But I think the resilience of India shone really bright in this forum. I think, of course, this has also been extremely landmark year, which obviously India did preside over their G20, and of course Delhi was the host city. And I think while we were actually taking the CI agenda forward, I'm extremely pleased while taking the formal agenda of today to actually welcome Dr. Arvind Virmani. Thank you very much, sir, for taking out your time and interacting with the Northern Region Council. Obviously, if I can do the honors of giving a very brief introduction. So, I think Dr. Virmani is a member of Niti Aayog, and he previously served as chairman of the Foundation for the Economic Growth and Welfare, e-Growth, and also the president of the Forum for Strategic Initiatives, the FSI. He also served as executive director of IMF, chief economic advisor of the Ministry of Finance, and the principal advisor for the Planning Commission. He was also closely associated with the tax, tariff, foreign exchange, financial sector, and expenditure policy reforms from 1991 to 2009, and I do believe that he has also written multiple articles, journals, books, and book chapters. Of course, he was also involved in the national security strategy. Sir, just a very brief, I would say, introduction of your very illustrious career. But I would actually, without taking too much time, I would like to invite you, sir, to actually address the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, Mr. Singhania, and Prashant, for inviting me. So I generally tend to speak too much, and I have this semi-academic background. So I'll also not, I'm not very good at diplomatic words, but I'm happy to be here, and let me just start. So what I'm going to give you is kind of a medium long-term perspective. That's what we do in NITI. Generally the short-term, of course, any of my short-term projections you generally go into Twitter. I'm happy to talk about it, but my job is kind of medium long-term, and I'm going to give you one perspective I hope you will find interesting. So, next, is there somebody doing it, or do I have a control? Yeah, okay. Very briefly, what I will look at, I'm the macro person in NITI, probably the only one in government, besides the short term, of course, which is the finance ministry. So what I will give you is what I see as the opportunities and risks. A key part of that is the demographics, the part on geopolitics and geoeconomics you all see, but I'm going to connect these together. And the issue is of exploiting all the opportunities, how to go about doing that. Sometimes there is this question asked, services or manufacturing. So I've just put it there for the thing. I don't think it's either or anything, it's everything. We have 1.4 billion people. We have to exploit every opportunity which comes. I think this is academic thinking and question. Okay, should we have services or manufacturing? It's totally irrelevant for practical purposes. And the key part of this, which it leads into, is the supply chain diversification, de-risking, decoupling, all kinds of different names, which is key part, I think, of our strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. Some elements of where this is coming from, China, role of developed countries from our perspective, and I'll give you a little bit of the policy framework for attracting supply chains. And then a little idea of the reforms. I won't go into the details, I'm sure you're aware of it, but I think I have to say something about it because I think they are as important as the 91 reforms. They are not complete, I was involved directly in the 91 reforms. So I want to give you a little bit of idea on that. And then maybe one graph, if we have time, on what I expect the outcome will be. Next. So, So if you look at the graph there, this is a graph of world exports ratio to GDP, total exports, merchandise exports and services. So the world exports of goods and services as a percentage of GDP peaked in 2007 and more or less a lot of fluctuations, no trend. That is that blue dotted line whose numbers are on the left. This is what is the start of what was called deglobalization. You see that little V curve down there in 2008, the global financial crisis. But actually, it's not deglobalization, it's become flat. Okay, so there's no more globalization. That is in fact a trend. But if you look at merchandise exports, they rose very sharply. That is I think the orange line again on the left, rose very sharply in the period 98 to 2007, and then have actually been on a bit of a declining trend. So these two facts, especially the merchandise, is important for the rest of my story. Part of it is that the question is, why are we talking about manufacturing when there is no apparently aggregate opportunity in merchandise trade? So that's the big part of my story. Okay, and trend downs since then. The shift in supply chains is the only way to increase the share. That's the key point here. Okay, but it's also relevant when we talk a little bit about China. So service exports are rising. That's the positive part of it. I won't have too much time to go into it, but if I have the time, I have a lot to say about that. So the supply chain shift and new developments on services. This is two parts of my story here. So the key driver of all this is demographics. This is a very important chart. Let me just briefly explain it. This is world share of working age population. 3 lines on the right, 1990, 2020, 2050. The first 2 lines give you the differences. Just taking the shares of each of those countries and subtracting it. So the first line is the past, the second line is the future. I don't know if anybody can see it. And the important part is here I have divided it into 2 parts. They are the high income countries, USA, Western Europe, UK, Japan, South Korea and Taiwan. You can see it's red both places, right? So you had a decline and it's going to continue. That's going to be a big part of this comparative advantage story which I have here and which is part of our strategy, so to say. And then you see the upper middle income countries from 8 onwards: China, Russia, Thailand, Indonesia, Mexico, Vietnam. Vietnam actually is lower middle, but these are our potential competitors for what we are going to say. And you see all of them are now red in the second part of it. So the demographics, everybody who is relevant to us is going to have a decline in working age population. That's the huge opportunity for India. As you can see, even Vietnam, who is the closest to us as a lower middle income country at the bottom, India is the only country whose working age population share will increase. That's the green thing at the bottom, 0.3. Okay? So that's the big part of my story. So I think I've given you that, but the part on the left, if you look, this is going to be a driver of comparative advantage. To put it very simplistically, we are going to move from unskilled labor intensive to semi-skilled to high skilled. Now you would say we already have whatever 1200 GCCs in Bangalore, but this we are talking about 1.4 billion people. Okay, I'm talking the whole average of the country. So we have to move from low skill to middle skill to high skill. Next. So what are the implications of this? What I've done here is bring in some elements of other things which are happening and put them together with the demographics and try to show you what we have to do and what we have not to do. So other trends which will interact with the demographics, one is anti-immigration sentiment in the US, even in the US rather. Europe, of course, different countries. Europe, Germany, Russia, all these countries have been declining in terms of population, working age population. Now on top of that, anti-immigration means they are going to have an even worse problem. For us, everything which is bad for them is good opportunity for us. I mean, put it a little bluntly, but I'm not a diplomat. That's it. So what is it? Okay, anti-immigration. So that means, so they are going to go for robotics and labor-saving AI. We have to do the opposite. I get very irritated when people compare China has so many robots, etc. It's totally irrelevant for us. Of course, there will be industries where we will do it. I have no problem with that. But this obsession of comparing everything copy-paste from others is wrong. That's one message here. What we need AI is not labor-saving AI. We need enhancing, quality-enhancing AI. And it's possible. It's already there. That's the second sad part, that people are so obsessed with AI, and the stuff we actually need is all there. I'll explain a little bit on that. So what the result is, online import of services and skills. That is it. That's the skill part of it. It's going to go online. I'll explain in more detail later. Okay. The second part of it is the digitization. What does it mean? Unbundling of non-business services. That's a big thing which is going to happen. Every service. As I said, if I have time, I will. But I've mentioned them here. But I have some actual stories of this which will show you what's happening. It's going to happen. Work from home started, and the trend was there. The pandemic accelerated the trend. But for my purposes, the important thing is given rise to social acceptability of work from anywhere. Work from anywhere means, for us, work from India. Okay, simple. So skill for India, skill for the world. It's the slogan I've used. PM said something like that, but I translate it into this simple expression. Very, very important, skilling. So it's also, of course, an instrument for empowerment and inclusiveness, which I will speak in other areas, but here I want to give you the business message. Okay, next. So some of the other trends which are important, but not as important as the first one. So national security, you're all aware of what happened in 2020, etc., but it's happening everywhere. India, Philippines, Taiwan, Vietnam, this huge uncertainties and risks. High-tech issue of defense and dual use. Defense supply chains, repair, maintenance, they are all looking for trusted partners. It was incredible when I discovered, I don't know how many of you know, maybe many of you do, that some of the key parts of what goes into US defense equipment is actually manufactured in China. I mean, it's amazing. So now, just suddenly they are waking up. But again, opportunity for us. So India's Atmanirbhar defense production, global middle skill intensive repair, maintenance, high skill design and development. So all those things are relevant for the defense. So this threat is being turned into opportunity. That's the point here. And that's how we should think. That's how I think. Then of course, geopolitics again, all these threats, economic boycott, sanction, bans, NTBs. So PRC has done it with Japan, with Korea, Australia, India, USA, EU, pandemic supply, etc. And so suddenly people have discovered there's a huge geographic concentration through the logistics disruption. So again, there's a basic foundation for supply chain diversification, de-risking, decoupling. And we are right there in the middle of it. So that's a big opportunity. So what exactly is it? Next. So from our perspective, PRC has a monopoly over manufactured exports, which is a huge vulnerability for everybody, for India, for US, all those who are threatened by China. So instead of China plus one, I believe it's going to, in the short term, actually it's China plus N. But in the medium long term, it's going to be China plus India plus N. Okay, what does that mean? In economics, we have a concept of a duopoly with a competitive fringe. That's what I'm talking about. So all these developments which we have noted, in my view, is going to lead to this kind of thing, and we're going to make sure it happens. The lead doesn't mean we sit on our hand, it is going to happen. No, it's possible, and we must make sure it happens. So we have now evidence to show that as far as US is concerned, the biggest beneficiaries are Vietnam, Thailand, Mexico, and India is in 4th position. But there's a logic to this. Thailand and Vietnam are neighbors. So what is basically happening is China is just shifting across the border. Very convenient. How much they make there, etc., we don't really know, but okay, whatever. And Mexico, because it is UCMCA, okay, it's like a easy entry into the US. So some things which need that kind of thing are shifting to Mexico, and India is, in my view, is getting the solid long-term stuff. We've got to make sure we are number one. So, of course, I don't have to tell you that this is really the last opportunity to get manufacturing, to drive structural change, to expand labor-intensive manufacturing, exports, etc. Okay, so again, I think this is something you know probably. Our advantages is size, right? Land, in principle, we have the skill range, the land, infrastructure, R&D, etc. We just got to make sure it's there and available for the people who want to use it. Next. So, what we have is that there are, just very quickly, what is it that is already good, what needs to be improved. So one is that there is an improvement in competitiveness in India over the last 10 years. So Indian wages are now less than PRC wage for quite some time. Big infrastructure investments, I'm sure you have seen that. And the reforms and simplification. Again, I'm not saying here everything is complete, lots more needs to be done, and we are quite fully aware of that. And by the way, I make this an invitation to anybody. Part of my job, as I see it, is to get the truth from you, and I'm always available for that. Anything bad happens, you tell me. See, the thing is, somebody asked me, I said, I'm willing to listen, but I cannot promise action. And the way I put it now is that if it is affecting 1 to 10 people, it's the job of the line ministries. If it's affecting 100 or 2,000 people, it's my job. Because then I need to change, or get the policy changed. Okay? So that's the difference. When I say I have to have enough evidence, it can't be 3 people who are having this problem. Okay? So, the negatives, of course, is India's stagnant share of FDI and merchandise exports. FDI is very important. I hope you're all aware that it bundles technology and long-term risk capital. When people think about technology, they've always thought of some sophisticated stuff you do and robotics and AI. No, the way I think of technology is the whole management, skilling, use of, we get a little bit, we are coming to supply chains. So, the supply chain, 2/3 of world trade is now in MNC supply chains, okay? And we didn't have any. We missed that complete bus. We've been competing on 1/3 of world trade. It's an amazing thing if you think of it. Just that one little third, 1/3. So 2/3 or even more MNCs are headquartered in USA and some in US and UK. So we have to get these. This is very clear understanding. And I'm glad that I played some role. I've been tweeting about it for years before I joined the government. I've been in government now for 14 months, but I think everybody in government recognizes this now. So we were completely absent from these supply chains, completely, zero. Okay. And the other one is the competitive disadvantage that, for example, Vietnam EU FTA gives a 12.5% tariff advantage in electronics. Now that's big. Talk to the electronic people, you find out. I talk to Apple and others. That is huge. Everything else pales in comparison. So what's the conclusion? Obvious. We have to have an FTA with EU, with anybody. I mean, all developed countries. I'll talk more. Okay, next. So very quickly on the PRC, it's important to understand what they've done. they have deliberately created export monopolies. They control 40% of the exports of telecom equipment, EDP and office equipment. 40%. Textiles 47%, pottery, light fitting, etc. for 67%, that's the highest. So they've gone systematically and created these monopolies in the country. This has not just happened. Much higher concentration in 6, 8 and 10 digits. There's a table you can see next, but if as our foreign minister put it very nicely in the US, he said that if this has happened in the US, the domestic antitrust people would be after them. But they were completely ignored internationally. Nobody bothered. It was a great thing, factory of the world. I'm probably the only person I've been talking about it for 20 years. Believe me, 20 years at least. Warning about the spying, about everything which is coming out now. So, really, there's two things which I think is important to understand. I'm probably taking more time than I should, but there are two elements of these supply chains in China. One are basically very simple consumer goods which are linear backward integration. That's how we used to think of import substitution in the old days. And they are simple things like leather goods, garment, textiles, plastic products, etc., which are like that. But then there are very complex chains, which are electronics, ADP, etc., where things go back and forth. The simple ones, they just do backward integration. They are simple. But for doing these complex things, you need to have a simplified system. This is the thing I'm trying to convey to my colleagues in the rest of the government. You need huge reform of the customs duty, or you need FTAs with all the developed countries, actually. Okay? So these two things are somewhat different. That's the main point here. Okay, we'll just show this. Next one. These are all the numbers I've already told you, but the red part in the middle, I just want to say, what people don't understand again is that this monopoly gives them monopoly benefits. Okay? It's not just for the fun of it. Monopolies give benefits. Okay? And they derive the full benefit. So being a dominant supplier, okay, that's the key thing here. Because if you look at traditional theory, they just don't have any dynamics in it. So they deliberately give subsidies to create dynamic advantage, and then that gives them the benefit. It's a long-term thing. It doesn't happen just like that. Next. So next, yeah. So look at this. This is very important because part of this is proof. Okay. Remember what I said, that the curve flattened out in 2008. Now look at the share of Chinese merchandise trade, total trade. That is the red line. See how it keeps going up. There's no flattening. That's the biggest proof of what I've said that you can find. It's subsidized. It's done deliberately. I hope you can all see that red line, and I've drawn a trend line. There's not much difference. There was slightly faster trend before 2007, slightly slower afterwards, but it just keeps going. This is the share. The whole world trade is not growing much, but Chinese keep growing. Okay? So it's clear suggestion of the increase in all different kind of subsidies. Next. So here is the positive side of it, and again, I'm telling you this because there are so many myths. I still keep getting questions of why we didn't join RCEP. Well, what I give them is this. So let me give you. This is very important. So what I'm saying is the opportunities for countries like us are in the developed countries, not in China. Of course, we have a difficult problem for other reasons which you know of. But even for other countries, opportunities developed countries. So high-income developed countries, I've chosen I mentioned all these. Their economies are complementary to India's in terms of comparative advantage. They are the source of technology and FDI. Largest market for manufactured goods, including labor-intensive. Supply chain, I've already mentioned before. There's a close association between MNC, FDI in a country and its imports of merchandise from the country. These are all established database facts. Okay? Now, the table shows importance of DCs relative to China. So let's move to the table. So if you look at the table, I'm just going to read out some of the results. I will leave this presentation for those who want to see it. But the five countries, US, EU, Japan, UK, ROK, they are stable given on the left 2 years because 19, there was a pandemic in between, so I've given two columns, otherwise I've just given one. I've given 19 and 22. I mean, there have been some big shifts, so you have to be careful which one you use. So first two are outward FDI from these countries, the next two are manufactured imports. So source of 60% of global FDI comes from these five countries. That is 7 times China's FDI. Okay, there's no comparison. Import, 53% of world merchandise imports are by these 5 countries, and China is, which is 5 times that of China. Okay, we talk about China as the factory of the world. It doesn't import. Okay, it just produces. It keeps backward integration, import substitution, exports. Just Japan, UK and Korea constitute as large a market for foreign manufactured goods as China. Just these 3 countries, the smallest 3 developed countries. You add US and EU, there's no comparison, which I've already told you. So what is the bottom line? We need the FTAs or some version of it with USA, EU, UK. EU and UK and Taiwan, EU, UK we are discussing. I think we should have an FTA with Taiwan. Maybe with the elections over we will. And some version of an FTA because they are against it. They don't want any FTAs now. So that is a problem from their side, not ours. I think we would be happy to have something of an FTA. So what is the policy? The basic bottom line is what I call a dualistic trade policy. We've got to be clear that PRC, the People's Republic of China, is different. Okay? They have asymmetric policies and we should not be scared or shy of having a similar policy towards them. I was addressing a group of Singapore investors who came to see us, and one of the guys who appeared to be a Singapore Chinese asked me, well, what's wrong with what China did? They did this thing, they've become good, their poverty has gone down, they are the factory of the world, what's the wrong? I said, fine. So if there's nothing wrong, if we do the same thing to them, there's nothing wrong, right? Or does it work only asymmetrically? So if they can do it and it's good for us. So there's some, how much time is there? Just tell me so I'll skip this.
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes there. So I just wanted to tell you about the People's Republic. I mean, some of you may not be interested, but I just want to show why I've been saying this for 20 years and why, I'm sorry to say it, but I can say it bluntly here, the China experts were in the US and UK were so stupid. Okay? That's why I put this there. If you're interested, I'll say it, otherwise I'll just skip it. Anybody interested? Okay. So, there was two professors named Lange and Lerner who developed a concept of the social market economy, socialist. They were pro-socialist, but they realized that markets have certain benefits. Okay? So Marxist, of course, the Stalinist model was all control. Okay? Mao just adapted it to decentralize the party and the production, but it was all still controlled from the top. They gave the direction. They didn't control it like the Russians. You know, Russians defined everything, up and down. What Mao did was to decentralize it, but the key messages always came from the top. Okay? What Lange Lerner did is that they said the party, if it just controls the assets and let the market function below. Okay? So everything is still owned by the party. You know, in Marxism, there are no private. So that is what Deng did. He converted it into a socialist market economy. Okay? It's a brilliant job he did. I mean, there's no question. I'm appreciating, but then listen. So in 2006, I studied this and I wrote a paper which used to be on the Planning Commission website. It is now somewhere else, which said what are the lessons we can learn from this socialist market economy for a democratic country, right? We have our constraints. So that is it. So what they did was they used this thing and projected to everybody that they are a capitalist economy like Singapore, Japan, etc. Okay? They are not. They are a socialist market economy. The party gives the direction from the top. the way I used to put it was, you know, their central bank, you know, we have a guy who, I know one of the governors who actually carried a resignation in his pocket, a good friend of mine. He said if the finance minister told me do X and Y and I didn't want to do it, I would produce that resignation. In China, that guy sits in the upper room, the ECB guy sat in the basement, but everybody knew who's the boss. Okay? It's just the outer thing. The control was all with the party. Now, of course, given Mao's decentralization, there was decentralization, but it's to the provincial party. Okay, the provincial party decides what to do in their province. Okay, that's the only. So that's the point I'm making. That this is not something I've dreamed up today. I've been talking about it. I've written about it 2006. That's how many years ago? That's 17 years ago. It's on paper. So what we have to diversify. So my point is the dualistic. You have to be tough with China. Higher tariffs. That's the only way. The first thing which came out from President Trump, of course he started in 2008, but it was not done very intelligently. And the first thing which came out is that he would put a 10% tariff on all imports. The latest thing which I read, I hope it is correct, is saying that they'll put a 60% tariff on imports from China. That is the correct dualistic policy. Okay? I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if Trump is going to win, but that's the policy. So, PLI, a lot of questions about PLI. Very briefly, the idea, the original idea, again, you know, when things start, things go, everybody takes it everywhere. I'm not justifying the whole thing, but the original idea was very good. The basic idea is rooted in simple microeconomics, which is that there is a curve of average cost. You know, if you have it's a scale like this. There's a minimum efficient scale. If you're below it, your costs go up very fast. If you're below, I mean, left of it, if you're right of it, they are virtually flat. So the point is that the Chinese produce 1,000 times more than us. They are up here. We were up here. Okay, so the idea is to get our firms down to that minimum efficient scale. And the PLI was a very good scheme designed to do that. Okay, so it's very good, for example, for electronics. That is why you have the mobile success. Again, as I said, I'm not here to justify anything. Then everybody got into the act. I'm thinking, okay, where will it work, where will not? So clearly, I mean, I don't need to tell it, you know, there are other industries where this will not work. Okay? So, but the original idea, if we focus on that and keep to that, is a good one. Next. So FTAs with all DCs, I'll run through it, I'll just read those, but because it's just a summary. So MNCs anchored supply chains, 2/3 of trade, majority headquartered in the US. So US is very critical for us. Competitive disadvantage with FTA, I've already told you about 12.5, but also Bangladesh garments. They have an advantage. It's not just that they're very efficient or much more efficient than us. MNC anchor, this is the part which I try to educate people. I'm sure you're aware, or maybe you're not if you haven't dealt with MNC, that MNC anchors are critical. We know Southeast Asia, we all praise that, including South Korea. The MNCs initially were critical even to South Korea, which now has its own champions. But they are still very important for all the South Asian countries. Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, all the ones who have succeeded. Okay? Why? Because they invest in skills, quality and timeliness. MSMEs may be very good, but there are very few who meet these standards. So what these guys do is they do the skilling, because they have to have a faultless supply chain. That is something, this is technology. Okay, they have the technology of management and thing. It's not, as they say, rocket science, but it's critical to success. Okay, so you will see, again, I'm not here to sing praises for PM, but he has picked this up. He's talking about quality. I'll give you a quote from him just now. So, rest of the world free and fair trade. So, here is the three-layered thing. China, higher tariffs. Developed countries, FTAs, which I propose, I say reduce it to zero if you get the benefits. I'm not saying that is the government policy. The policy is to get close to that, because in the real world there's all kinds of other issues, right? There's not simple idea. And then rest of the world more or less free and fair trade. So why am I confident that eventually this will happen? I mean, eventually the pure next. I want to quote you. So global quality I already mentioned. So exporting. One of the research which shows is that exporting firms' profits, productivity are much higher than domestic firms. So what I've been trying to convince states is, please pay more attention. You will benefit. They are higher skilled. They have better incomes. You will get yourself. So do something about it. It's not some favor you're doing to the central government or to somebody else. It's not the foreign exchange. This old concept of foreign exchange. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's this. Okay. So here is the quote. This is a quote from, you can see it in The Economist of 21st December 2023. It's the most important quote. I picked it out from the interview. And it's worth reading. I'll just read it to you. In one of the questions he answered, we aspire to create conditions where everyone sees value in being in India, to invest and expand their operations here. We envision a system where anyone from around the world feels at home in India, where our processes and standards are familiar and welcoming. That is the inclusive global standard system we aspire to build. He's very clearly saying aspire. He's not saying we built it. Okay? So there will be continuing exports. Now these two I can skip. Next one. So here in these two slides, what's the time? Yeah, so I've taken more than my time. So I'm going to skip these. I just want to read the top words: skill for India, skill for the world. That's the concept. Okay? And there are many, many layers of it. People I would give you, but you are not concerned that much, but I am very concerned because we have to generate jobs. And there are so many skills which people are not aware of. Next one. Services unbundling. This is the critical one, which I'll maybe tell you a little bit. So remote delivery, you understand. But the example I want to give you is, I was in OECD in February or March in Paris last year. They don't have, at a kind of semi-academic conference type of stuff, so they don't now have enough people to run government services. Okay? Forget other things, of course, education, health, everything. But they don't even have enough people to run government services. So what is going to happen is, all these services are going to get unbundled. In the 80s and 90s, manufacturing got unbundled. What does it mean? Earlier you made a shoe, you did everything in the factory. Then you unbundled it, you said, okay, this part can be done better in China, this can be done better in Malaysia. And you separate those things out and get them from there. Okay? You make it in Malaysia and you ship it somewhere. Okay? Same thing is going to happen in services, except unbundling here means it is going to be online supply. Okay? And the example I give is of income tax. Okay? We are probably one of the first countries which has automatic, for at least non-business people like me. Okay? For the last 2 years, I don't have to fill out my income tax. It's automatically all done. I just have to make sure it's correct and tick it and give it to my CA. That is something service you will supply from here. There will be many, many other things like that. I just want to leave the thought for, because it's useful for you and maybe your relatives or friends or whatever to think about. Okay? Next. So I do want to say this because not all of you know about it, but I mentioned to you good policy framework. Systematic. Okay? I was there in the 91 reforms. I spent the time there in the finance ministry. We were very careful. We picked only two big areas. Okay? One was products, manufactured goods, everything connected with it. And a little bit on the financial side, because they were connected. We didn't think it was politically feasible to do anything else. We couldn't do the public sector reform, we couldn't do the factor market, the labor market. Here now it's systematic. Okay? Of course you all know about the IBC and the GST, but in 2020 onwards, systematically going through the labor reform, the 4 codes are on the thing. We are just waiting for the states to approve all of it and issue the rules. Once there are only 3 or 4 states which are One of them is being obstructive. I don't want to name it, but we'll have to think about that, I'm sure. Factor markets, what we say, public sector, even products and services which are left, the best example that is space. So even industries which were not freed, or liberalized as we call it, right? And you're seeing the results. They are like something like 5 to 10 Indian companies now which are globally competitive. They are doing work for international. Okay? It's amazing. I must say that I'm also a bit surprised. But they were all there. There were brilliant people waiting around to do something. Okay, the rest of it you know about, so and I want to kind of leave you with this graph and then some conclusions. So look at this graph. So if we do all these things, we will do continuing reforms. I think for the next 5 years, an average of 7% is quite feasible. 7% growth plus minus 0.5 I usually say. So what is it? This is not even based on 7.7 by the way. This is based only on 6%. And I just want to show you. So what is happening here? Remember the demographics also. So this is an index of economic power which I built in 2004 or something. But if you want to think of it, think of current US dollar. That roughly matches this. The trend in US dollar income or GDP will be more or less like this, okay? Just to fix your mind. So this is always relative to the US, that index, and the 1 is the top. So the US is not shown. US is flat 1, okay? So this is relative to the US, okay? So first let's look at the green. That is the EU, okay? You see it's on a declining trend. The major part of that is the demographics, okay? All countries, Italy, etc., everybody is going down because of no working people. And that's the opportunity which I mentioned. The blue is China. The important point I want to make here, and I have never had any problem admitting my mistakes, this is the first time I was wrong. I've been doing these forecasts since 2004. This year is the new one. Earlier, that curve, you see that sharp change in trend, that was happening in my forecast above the number 1. That is, their economic power or their real economic strength would end up being higher than the US. For the first time now, I believe it will be lower. So this blue curve never gets to the 1. Oh, by the way, this is till 2050. Okay? So it crosses the EU. It's already crossed actually, right? But they are not going to overtake the USA in a hurry. The red one is India. Again, the second mistake, if you look at the bottom, I wish I could point it out, there's a little flattening there. Okay? My earlier forecast kept going up from there. That there was no flattening. Now, of course, I have an excuse, but it's an excuse. I say it myself, the pandemic. But it's not only that. I did make a little bit of a mistake here. But I'm pretty confident about the curve going up now. Okay, so you see we overtake before 250, we overtake the EU, but we will not still by 250 come to the China level. This is very important because in my interactions I see two kind of people. One who just stuck in this, that we are at the bottom and we'll remain there. Their thinking is like that. The others are, they see this curve and say, we are already there, we can act big. No, you can't. You have this huge effort from here to here. That crossover of the blue line, that is Japan. Okay, we will overtake Japan in about 3 to 5 years. The CA has said, I don't know, he said 27, but I prefer, my forecasts have been right more than any other person I challenge. I do that because I'm pretty cautious, because I know there will be shocks. I don't know what they will be. Okay, there will be shocks. So I always give a range. All my forecasts are X% plus minus. Okay, my usual range is 0.5. During the pandemic, the thing became very difficult to predict, I expanded it to 1%. Okay, now I'm back to 0.5. Okay, so that you got the picture. This is the important picture. That's the whole effort from business, even NGOs. NGOs I found some of them are doing great work in terms of digitizing and improving online education, health. Okay, that's a key part of my message, but it's not here. The digital part, I didn't have time, I knew I would go over. So, conclusion. The digital is going to play a big part in the way I conceive India, that whole line up there. So, evolution of global trade will be driven by global shifts in share of working population, high-tech decoupling and division into two groups. We will be part of that developed country group. I have no doubt we have to be. Okay. Of course, we will keep some kind of relationship with Russia, that is also understood. Partial economic decoupling, diversification and decoupling, de-risking from monopoly acquired by factory of the world. This is a great opportunity. India is well positioned to take advantage of trade, only country with potential to match the PRC resources, a sound policy framework with continuing reforms. I gave you some elements of that framework. If there are questions, I can answer them. Largest overlap with medium long-term interests of the US. That is critical. I hope you understand that and give this message. I can assure you that the government of India fully understands this now. So please go and give this message. This message is not going through. Okay? All this stuff is short-term. I mean, I'm sure Harpal would probably disagree with me. I've seen your tweets, etc. But I can assure you, I'm almost 75. I have a living memory of the history of India from the time of college. I have all those headlines, everything which has happened. It's in my mind here. And believe me, every time there's a regime change, there are hiccups. The something like 17, 18, 19, there was a hiccup. I don't deny that. But it's over. I can assure you, it's a completely different thing for the next 5 years. Okay? And I hope you can convey that we have this overlap. Don't get misled by these little things which happen. They have happened. I have seen them. Okay? VP Singh's time. The Socialist Party of Mulayam Singh, what kinds of things you are too young to know. They are all up here in my head. This is nothing unusual. It happens. And it's over. That's the part I'm saying. I'm confidently saying, as a person who's been in this business for a long time. Okay. So, red carpet to MNC and the supply chains, that's clear. The Micron, Apple, etc. There's a conscious policy now. It was not there 2 years ago. I've been talking about for long. But now I can see it. It's there. Okay. GCCs, etc. You know about the high end. So, in all this supply chain business, we can't neglect that. That is going to expand. And it's going to expand into what I said, everything else. Business services is doing great. That is one of the good things. We are on a curve which actually is expanding. Remember I told you manufacturing, we were on this little 1/3 part, which was a dead end. The big thing was the MNCs. So on this one we are on the curve, but it's a huge opportunity in the social sector. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raman. Is it okay to take a few questions?
Yeah.